Is it possible the person who grabbed Nancy Guthrie had to switch things up mid-operation? The physical clues definitely point that way. The intruder clearly mapped everything out, but an unexpected event indoors triggered a rushed backup strategy right on the spot. We aren't debating if the strategy shifted. The red physical evidence proves it absolutely did. The real mystery is what triggered that sudden pivot. Let's dive deep into exactly what went down. A truly chilling detail to surface from this inquiry is the snapshot of the red stains left-right on Nancy Guthrie's front steps. The Pima County Sheriff's Department verified those splatters share Nancy's genetic markers, turning them into the core physical clue of the mystery. Yet the true importance of that visual, which plenty of news outlets missed, isn't merely the presence of those traces, it's about where they are missing. You won't find anything in her sleeping quarters, nothing in her cooking space, zero traces across the main family rooms.
The source close to the investigation, that there were no signs of an assault inside Nancy's house. And the way it was described to me is that some rooms were actually immaculate.
An insider tied closely to the probe informed News Nation's Brian Anton that Nancy Guthrie's living space looked untouched, showing zero signs of a physical struggle. In fact, most spaces were considered absolutely spotless. That same insider mentioned finding absolutely no signs of a struggle indoors. The way they explained it to me, several rooms actually looked downright pristine and totally undisturbed. When journalist Ashley Banfield covered the case on day 56, she featured Phil Waters on her broadcast. As a former Houston police major crimes investigator with over 400 solved mysteries, he echoed that exact same perspective. Detectives found zero physical clues in the sleeping or lounging areas. Those crimson marks simply did not track throughout the residence. It starts at one very specific spot, the main entryway. On her audio show called Drop Dead Serious Reporter, Ashley Banfield shared insights backed by a pair of independent police contacts. Those red marks near the main entryway weren't solely outdoors. They started indoors. The exact same splatter crossed over the doorway threshold and onto the porch. Essentially, the crimson trail found indoors perfectly aligns with the physical traces discovered just outside that main door.
A blood pattern inside the home that matches the blood pattern outside that front entrance. Well, I learned this week where it is, and it is right across that front threshold of the front door.
Well, I recently discovered exactly where that crucial evidence was located, resting directly across the main entryway's sill. While the Pima County Sheriff's Department hasn't publicly verified this, Banfield laid out her inside knowledge with total precision. A pair of authorities backed up each other's claims, with one insider providing even deeper specifics. When the second contact revealed what prompted patrol officers to call in the Major Crimes Unit, it absolutely wasn't the outdoor traces. It was the concerning scene discovered at the main entryway. Ultimately, you are looking at a perfectly tidy residence save for one specific area, that lone spot where the red evidence starts, lingering just long enough to mark up both edges of the entryway frame before pushing outward across the steps. There wasn't a sprawling indoor fight or a messy trail, just that single event at the front door. The intruder never intended for things to finish there. Figuring out why it did and decoding those final chaotic moments is exactly what we are breaking down today. Let's look at how the location was staged, which reveals a lot about the original strategy before everything completely unraveled. During her initial public conversation about her mom vanishing, which broadcasted on the Today Show on March 26, 2026, alongside co-worker Hoda Coop, Savannah Guthrie revealed that the rear entryways were wedged wide open. She actually emphasized that specific detail 2 different times during their chat. In that initial fog of confusion, her relatives assumed emergency medics had simply rushed a gurney through that rear access point. It felt like the only logical answer at the time, yet Nancy's mobile device handbag and everyday footwear were all left behind indoors. She was snatched away in her sleepwear without any shoes on. No medical rescue team ever arrived. Those rear entryways were intentionally wedged open by an intruder. The assumption that emergency responders arrived because of those wedged open rear entryways is flipped entirely by Banfield's police contacts. They provided a crucial detail that shifts Savannah's weird discovery into proof of a calculated tactical setup. During the March 31st broadcast of Drop Dead Serious Banfield, noted that several police insiders confirmed the intruder actually grabbed Nancy's patio planters to wedge those entryways wide open. That rear cooking area access features a pair of distinct parts. A mesh bug screen alongside a solid heavy wooden slab. The culprit wedged both open, even using identical planters to secure the yard's rear fence latch.
I've had 2 subsequent law enforcement sources since that have confirmed back door wide open. He took her beautiful flower pots and he propped open that screen door.
I have since spoken with 2 separate police contacts who verified that the rear access point was left completely unlatched. The trespasser utilized her gorgeous garden planters to secure that mesh frame. That means 3 distinct entryways were deliberately wedged open at the exact same time. Furthermore, a top-tier insider told the journalist that several outdoor surveillance lenses and floodlights were completely destroyed right before the incident. Local authorities at the Pima County Sheriff's Department haven't gone on the record to validate these exact elements yet. Weigh that carefully, but the picture this paints: knocking out the security lenses, killing the outside lights, and leaving a trio of entryways propped wide open. That definitely isn't the chaotic work of a spur-of-the-moment intruder. Nobody shatters surveillance tech they haven't already scouted out. You certainly don't grab random items around the yard to wedge doorways ajar unless you've previously mapped out those exact escape routes. Plus, none of this intense prep work goes down during a criminal's very first visit to the scene. Federal agents' own digging perfectly backs up this exact theory. Detectives actually asked locals for surveillance tape covering January 11th and January 24th, both fall weeks prior to the February 1st kidnapping. While cops haven't officially revealed their motives, authorities simply don't hone in on 2 exact days unless they suspect crucial reconnaissance occurred around the target house then. That specific request screams one thing. Federal authorities strongly suspect the perpetrator lurked around NY's residence a minimum of 2 times before the actual vanishing. Sheriff Chris Nanos of Pima County explicitly went on record stating detectives view this abduction as a highly focused targeted strike. He also acknowledged authorities likely understand the driving reason behind it, though he's keeping things under wraps to protect the active case. Carefully selected, meticulously mapped out, and heavily stalked beforehand, multiple entryways prepped surveillance, neutralized with the rear intended as the getaway. That was the blueprint, yet we find a crimson trail near the main entrance. Let's dive into the most fascinating angle of this mystery that armchair detectives usually gloss over completely. Assuming this hit was as incredibly calculated as the clues scream it was, we need to dig much deeper than simply questioning a sudden detour. We must figure out the exact nature of this scheme, analyzing every single condition needed for a flawless execution, alongside the precise trigger that could send the whole house of cards tumbling down instantly. Pulling off a calculated hostage for cash grab, exactly what authorities suspect here, relies heavily on one absolutely unbreakable rule: total secrecy. The abductor cannot risk being recognized by their captive or definitively linked to the crime, because any solid physical description completely ruins the delicate dance of demanding money, bargaining, and establishing proof of life from the shadows. The very second their identity slips, the entire master plan goes up in smoke immediately. From that point forward, the mission shifts from a smooth payout to desperate survival mode. Clearly, our culprit knew staying invisible was paramount. Federal clip dumps from February 10th reveal the intruder creeping around NY's darkened front steps, executing a highly calculated maneuver. He stretches toward the doorbell lens while cleverly utilizing the surrounding bushes to completely shield his identity from the digital eye. Face completely covered, hands securely wrapped in tactical gear. Outfitted in dark outerwear and trousers, he's sporting a 25-liter Ozark trail pack alongside a clearly holstered sidearm. Every single detail captured here, from the facial covering to dodging the security lens, screams a desperate desire to stay a ghost. Yet this visual sparks a massive mystery the public has never gotten straight answers on. Sure, the disguise hid him from the outdoor tech, but did that covering stay on while creeping through the unlit master bedroom, specifically the exact second he ambushed Nancy Guthrie? We honestly have absolutely zero clue what she witnessed in those terrifying moments. That specific detail changes everything. A stealth-focused grab pulled off by a guy meticulous enough to blind the outside surveillance network and cover his features for a device he planned to smash moments later proves he obsessed over total invisibility. Slipping out the rear, avoiding neighborhood streets, dodging the main porch lenses, and sneaking past the fence. To vanish into the shadows perfectly aligns with the strategy craving total, unseen dominance. That alternate doorway wasn't merely a practical shortcut. It was the ultimate stealth tactic. Drag her through the yard, avoid any lingering neighborhood eyes, and melt right into the pitch black. Then, the moment of truth arrived inside alongside Nancy. During a morning show chat, Savannah Guthrie painted a vivid picture of her mom's health struggles, revealing crucial details that change everything. My mom suffered from absolutely excruciating agony. Her spine was incredibly compromised. Reaching the curb for letters was a miracle, but normally she couldn't even manage that. That medical reality totally shatters the feasibility of a sneaky backyard getaway. Forcing a physically ailing lady to navigate the culinary area, cross an outdoor deck, and traverse rough midnight landscaping without shoes is virtually impossible. True crime host Ashley Banfield tackled this exact dilemma head-on during her digital broadcast, boldly asking, "Was the intruder's grand idea to march Nancy at gunpoint through the prepped rear exit, and then bam, did it hit him that she simply couldn't physically handle the trek?" She speculated that perhaps the attacker completely failed to factor in Mrs. Guthrie's severe physical limitations during his getaway prep. Suddenly, he's forced to pivot completely on the fly. This brings us to the health obstacle theory, which is incredibly solid and grounded in hard facts. Someone struggling to fetch their daily post certainly wasn't going to sprint across a darkened yard while agonizingly hurt and staring down a barrel. Just the struggle to move freely might clarify why the strategy shifted. However, that movement theory leaves a major blind spot. It totally ignores the doorway area. Dr. Peter Valentine, who heads up forensic science at the University of New Haven, brought his massive courtroom expertise in splatter patterns to Banfield's show around day 52, breaking down the red traces left at the main entry. He characterized these marks specifically as skeletonized drops. That is highly specific industry jargon. It means the liquid hit the ground and started drying up before anything wiped it away. The edges harden while the middle remains completely bare. You do not get that from someone quickly walking past. Those marks require serious time to form. Right, so he observed what experts call skeletonized drops. Looking closely at the exterior spots, you can clearly tell they were already half dry. The liquid started setting on the ground before whatever was leaking it even shifted positions. Valentine noted spotting this exact phenomenon across both sides of the entrance, outdoors and indoors. He reasoned that if the red fluid pooled indoors for a while and also pooled outdoors for a while, we can make a solid guess. This was not just a fleeting second, it was a substantial wait. Nancy lingered right at that doorway long enough for evidence to puddle up across both sides of the frame. Simple movement issues do not trigger an entryway scene like this. If it was just about logistics, say, she could not manage the rear exit, so they carried her out the front. The physical traces there would look drastically different. It would show a swift exit, just a quick trip out the door. You absolutely would not see a heavy two-sided buildup of fluid flanking that specific doorframe for what a specialist calls a considerable time frame. Another event went down at that entrance, and it definitely was not quick. Something held Nancy right there, stalling her on both sides of the frame before anyone hauled her over the porch. Why would someone get pinned down at a doorway instead of being pushed right through, lingering long enough to leave hardened physical clues on both halves of the entryway? A fight, some serious pushback, or a clash that completely ruined any chance of a seamless getaway. Whatever caused this massive delay gave those droplets ample time to form the exact pattern Dr. Valentine pointed out. During a planned abduction relying entirely on staying faceless, nothing ruins the operation faster than the target actually knowing you. We need to clarify what familiarity means here. This was definitely not some random drifter hitting a random house. Detectives are officially convinced this was a calculated grab specifically aiming for Nancy Guthrie. The suspect stalked the grounds, figured out the security tech to shut it off, and mapped out an exact escape. They even scoped out random yard items to use later. You do not get that kind of tactical precision from us cruising by once. That requires intimate knowledge of the place. Did Nancy actually know the intruder back? That is the one massive mystery the available clues still cannot solve. However, the physical clues strongly hint at exactly how things would spiral if she did realize who it was. A shakedown operation completely hinges on keeping your identity hidden from the target. It is not about keeping them docile, because they rarely are. It is because everything that happens next falls apart if the captive can actually name you. Demanding a payoff, making those creepy phone calls, bargaining, all of that relies heavily on staying completely anonymous. Once the person taken figures out exactly who grabbed them, the whole game flips upside down. The danger level of eventually letting them go, which is the whole point of an extortion gig, skyrockets completely. Just imagine being the mastermind the exact second you realize your cover is blown. You prepped the location perfectly and stalked it during several different trips. You killed the security feeds and mapped your getaway routes. Your entire scheme assumes that once you secure the cash, your target has absolutely zero clue who you are. That is ground zero. Lose that anonymity and your smooth heist turns into something entirely different. An abduction where the captive knows their captor is no longer a simple extortion gig. It becomes infinitely more lethal for the perpetrator. It throws a massive wrench in the gears that no amount of prep work or cut wires can ever fix. Suddenly, you're dealing with a real person, someone with a specific identity and personal history tied directly to yours. To eliminate that vulnerability, only one brutal option remains. When we say her spotting him completely flipped the script, we mean it. This wasn't just some minor logistical tweak. It completely transformed the underlying danger level for every single event that followed. The physical evidence left at the entryway actually supports either theory, potentially hinting that both scenarios unfolded simultaneously. Enter Amy Santoro, a certified bloodstain pattern analyst and forensic scientist packing 18 years of hands-on expertise in both lab work and active crime scenes. She hopped on the March 17th, 2026 edition of SiriusXM's Megyn Kelly program, breaking down the forensic evidence using widely circulated media captured right outside Nancy Guthrie's property. She made sure to clarify that she has no official ties to the case, basing her insights entirely on open-source media. Therefore, her breakdown serves purely as an independent professional assessment, rather than a formal law enforcement conclusion. Regarding the porch evidence, she categorized the drops as gravity-driven stains plummeting from an open wound directly onto the ground. According to her breakdown, those droplets likely plunged from over 2 feet up in the air. However, she couldn't pinpoint the exact origin point, whether from a hand, arm, or face using only the provided media, but she absolutely could gauge the speed. Because of the sheer volume present, a slow trickle simply wouldn't leave that kind of trail if the person had been walking. In her professional view, the massive amount indicates a rather severe loss of fluid. The layout strongly suggests a rapid flow rate, creating heavy pooling and secondary splashing, known as satellite spatter. You typically see that specific effect when droplets plummet from a high elevation right onto a hard ground layer. Consequently, she estimated the drop height at roughly over 2 feet. Figuring out the total volume is absolutely crucial to deciphering the clues left at the doorway. A simple scrape or sluggish drip simply wouldn't generate the massive spread Santoro highlighted in those patio snapshots. However, a severe fast-flowing injury absolutely would. Furthermore, carrying a heavily injured person while moving creates the exact straight-down spatter pattern that both Santoro and O'Connell pointed out. The sheer amount proves something happened to Nancy's body before she ever reached that deck, while the droplet shapes confirm she wasn't on her own 2 feet. Santoro also clarified what the evidence effectively eliminates, noting that the stains don't point toward any kind of firearm involvement. The telltale signs of a ballistic impact, specifically the tiny, tightly packed dots associated with extreme velocity, were completely missing. She pointed out that the fluid spread just doesn't align with the catastrophic damage typically caused by a bullet. Instead, she suggested a few alternative causes without locking into one: a torn dermis, a heavy blow to the face, or perhaps a ruptured nasal vessel. Noting the fragility of aging skin, she explained that even a mid-level strike could easily trigger the heavy flow captured in the photos. Furthermore, Santoro made a crucial point that several media outlets have heavily misinterpreted, relying strictly on external press clips which completely lacked any visual access to the home's interior. She noted a lack of obvious stains right by the entrance. Based solely on what she could see, the violence seemed to happen outdoors rather than indoors, though she quickly added a massive caveat. She reminded everyone that the indoor crime scene remains a total mystery to the public. That exact disclaimer leaves room for the insider leaks reported by Banfield and the specialized doorway breakdown provided by Dr. Valentine. Santoro never claimed the house was clean. She was simply acknowledging the blind spots in the available media. Insider tips and professional evaluations actually fill in the massive blanks left by the camera lenses. Dried, flaky red stains bordering both edges of the doorframe suggest someone lingered at that entryway for quite some time. Stepping in for Fox News digital forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Benn reviewed the site imagery, bringing even sharper focus to the exact type of physical harm inflicted. He concluded that Nancy Guthrie was definitely losing fluid from either her facial region or her hands. He went on to describe the specific visual structure of the droplets. Noting their hollow donut-like appearance, he explained that this pale-centered shape usually forms when fluid mixes with exhaled oxygen from the mouth or nose. He stressed that these aren't just accidental spills. Judging by the visual design, the sheer quantity, and their specific placement across the outdoor deck, the evidence heavily points toward a forceful kidnapping scenario. Keep in mind, Bowden was operating purely off pictures without ever setting foot on the actual property. Tying those hollow-centered splatters to a facial injury is essentially an educated deduction based on shape analysis. It represents the most frequent origin for that exact visual footprint. It's far from an absolute medical verdict regarding Nancy's fate. However, both Santoro and Bowden completely align on one core detail. The fluid trail heavily implies trauma to the upper torso or head, meaning it wasn't a fatal blast or a ballistic strike. It points to something that generates a rapid flow near the neckline. Think of the aftermath of a heavy punch, a nasty tumble, or an intense face-to-face physical struggle. Former FBI investigator Maureen O'Connell went on News Nation's Brian Enon Investigates this past March 8th, breaking down the stain evidence by highlighting exactly what was missing. She spotted absolutely zero voids. For forensic analysis, voids are basically blank spaces left behind when an object blocks the spatter before it hits the ground. Someone walking naturally creates steady repeating blank spaces along the evidence trail. O'Connell noticed those expected gaps were completely absent from Nancy's porch, stating she seriously doubted the victim walked out herself. Footsteps or dragging objects would definitely leave blank spaces in the pattern, yet there was absolutely nothing breaking up the scene. Her professional takeaway: the perpetrators likely had her bundled up in something while physically removing her from the property. The drops were perfectly spherical, falling straight down from a steady height rather than stretching out, which clearly rules out anyone moving quickly or erratically. It indicates a controlled, steady carry. She also spotted fine misting patterns which usually happen when a person is actively breathing or coughing. This chilling detail suggests Nancy was still breathing, though potentially knocked out, while being taken away. She frankly told Brian Anton that she firmly believes two distinct individuals physically hauled the victim outside. Former federal investigator Jim Clemente backed up this main theory, noting the straight, slow-moving drop trajectory. However, he questioned how thoroughly she was bundled, pointing out that fluid was obviously leaking through whatever material covered her. Even with that minor debate, the main investigative takeaway stays exactly the same. She never walked out on her own. Attackers transported her while her feet hung freely, never breaking up the path of evidence. Drops fell straight down from an elevated position as they moved her. Now combine Dr. Valentine's doorway evidence with O'Connell's theory about the suspects carrying her. Valentine noted she lingered near the entrance long enough to leave partially dried spots across both sides of the doorframe. Meanwhile, O'Connell confirms that once past that doorway, attackers were completely bearing her weight. Putting this together paints a chilling scene. A prolonged, significant incident occurred right at that entryway. An event pinned Nancy there just long enough for drops to dry on the frame before she was ultimately hauled away across the deck. That front door wasn't merely an escape route, it was the actual location of a major incident. Let's break down the most logical timeline based on all this verified forensic data. Keep in mind, police haven't released their official version of events to the public yet. This narrative comes strictly from forensics expert opinions and inside sources. The house was essentially rigged beforehand. Someone took out the outside lights and cameras, intentionally leaving the rear entrance wide open. The attacker showed up fully geared up, wearing gloves and a mask, packing a 25-liter bag with a holstered firearm. He cleverly used bushes to blind the smart doorbell before shutting it down completely, an action clearly caught on the February 10, 2026 FBI tape. This guy was meticulous and calculated. It definitely wasn't his first time stepping inside that residence. Surprisingly, the ensuing events left absolutely zero physical clues indoors. Her bedroom was spotless. The cooking space and lounging areas were totally untouched. Insiders claim the entire home looked perfectly pristine. Whatever went down, it definitely wasn't some massive, drawn-out fight moving through the victim's everyday living spaces. The forensic trail simply doesn't start inside, and that missing evidence speaks volumes. An intruder entered with a very specific agenda, zeroing in on Nancy somewhere between the rear entry and front porch. Every hallway and room turned up completely empty, proving the entire terrifying encounter was isolated to a single contained spot. The altercation didn't drag from room to room, nor did it bounce around the property. Spotless rooms paired with that heavy doorway evidence point to a highly targeted, localized attack. Everything centers around that main entrance. Maybe Nancy woke up to a strange noise and walked over there herself, instinctively heading for the easiest way out of her house, or maybe she was dragged there. The forensic clues just aren't saying. What we do know is she lingered around that frame long enough to create the dried stains Dr. Valentine pointed out. It wasn't a fleeting second. She was stationed there. After that, attackers hauled her over the deck, leaving drops that specialists say came from a severe upper body injury dripping midair. She wasn't on foot. Multiple individuals were definitely carrying her. That's the unanimous agreement among all the retired federal agents who have dug into this timeline. Ex-FBI operative Harry Treatise recently shared with Yahoo News, subduing anyone, even an ailing 84-year-old woman, demands way too much physical effort for a single individual to pull off. That is why I am entirely convinced multiple perpetrators orchestrated this. Speaking to News Nation, Raymond Carr emphasized navigating rough terrain pitch black with Nancy required teamwork. Furthermore, Maureen Unell stated point blank to Brian Anton, "A pair definitely transported her. Look at the scene, the rear gate, the exterior screen, and the interior kitchen entryway all stood wide open. They prepped 3 separate entryways, yet completely abandoned them for their getaway." Speaking to Newsweek, retired FBI profiler Andrew Bringwell suggested capturing Mrs. Guthrie was the goal until a disastrous turn occurred. A physical struggle left her harmed, though thankfully alive. The situation spiraled. Their carefully laid blueprint completely fell apart. Those crimson traces staining the front porch prove exactly where things derailed. Ultimately, our entire investigation today centers around one incredibly elaborate scheme. From those early to mid-January scouting missions, to tracking and destroying security lenses, to cutting the illumination, even propping open rear pathways using random items found on site, and dressing head to toe in stealth gear, this entire operation hinged on one absolute necessity. The target could never realize who abducted her for a payout. Remaining completely anonymous wasn't just an afterthought. It formed their core strategy. Every subsequent step providing proof of existence, demanding cash, negotiating, and eventually letting her go relies entirely on staying nameless. They needed absolute certainty. She couldn't point a finger and say, "That's him." He covered his features for the outdoor lens before permanently shutting it down. During that pitch-black indoor ambush, Nancy's exact view remains a mystery. We cannot confirm if his disguise stayed secured. Did a familiar vocal tone, a specific physique, or his walking style give away his identity? Detectives are certain this was a highly focused abduction, meaning the perpetrators zeroed in specifically on Nancy Guthrie. Selecting a deliberate mark implies some level of personal connection, whether immediate or distant. Such ties mean either party might realize who the other is. If Nancy spotted a familiar trait, the scheme didn't just stumble. It shattered spectacularly. Suddenly utilizing that meticulously prepared rear escape route vanished from their minds. Panic set in. Extracting her from the premises instantly became the sole focus, stopping her from reacting or yelling out. Taking the main entryway offered the fastest escape. As Dr. Valentine noted during those crucial moments, lingering right by the frame, an altercation left crimson splatters across the doorway before they hauled her away into the night. Former federal operative Raymond Carr insists the rear served strictly as access, not an escape, yet entirely agrees regarding the forward exit. "I am absolutely positive they took her out the main entrance," he stated. While professionals debate the backyard's true purpose, those red stains on the porch tell a universally agreed-upon story. She was hastily dragged away from that spot, actively wounded. Here, official facts stop leaving us with massive, lingering mysteries. Did her recognizing him trigger a massive change of tactics that remains a theory, not absolute fact? Whatever Nancy witnessed, late January 31st through early February 1st, 2026, whoever she spotted, whatever words she spoke, how she reacted, or what startling obstacle her attacker suddenly faced, those crucial details simply aren't available in the public record yet. Detectives hold those secrets closely and refuse to comment, however the clues align perfectly. This premeditated grab demanded absolute secrecy to succeed. Their strategy focused obsessively on staying hidden from neighborhood eyes. Disabled tech-cut bulbs disguise faces and a secluded backyard getaway route, an intruder covering his identity perfectly before destroying the front porch lens entirely. Inside the residence remained completely untouched, save for that chaotic front doorway. Those stains rested along the frame, slowly coagulating, proving a significant delay happened right there before she vanished. Yet they utilized the main entrance, ignoring the pre-planned rear pathway they deliberately wedged open using her garden planters. They escaped out front out of sheer desperation and proximity, abandoning their original stealthy intentions entirely. Every clue points toward an unexpected face-to-face clash that completely destroyed their essential advantage. Physical traces show this struggle took time. It unfolded at a main entryway that was absolutely never meant for their getaway. Addressing the public, Savannah Guthrie pleaded for someone to step up, expressing her family's unbearable heartbreak. She continuously envisions her mother enduring unimaginable fear during those pitch-black nighttime hours, describing the thought as completely paralyzing. Currently, the Guthrie household promises a $1 million bounty for any tips bringing NY safely back home. Federal authorities are putting an extra $100,000 on the table for any clues that bring her home or put the responsible parties behind bars. Anyone holding on to details, no matter how small, about that fateful night in the Catalina Foothills just north of Tucson between January 31st and February 1st, 2026, please dial 1-800-CALL-FBI or send leads securely to tips.fbi.gov. Should these new details shift your perspective regarding the dark events inside that home when Nancy vanished, sound off. Drop your most critical theories below rather than spreading baseless rumors. This mystery absolutely requires deep analytical minds. The chilling case of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie shatters a fundamental illusion that locked doors and security cameras alone can keep the darkness at bay. When a predator meticulously studies a home, blinds the digital lenses, and breaches the sanctuary of an ailing grandmother, it serves as a stark, heartbreaking wake-up call for all of us. The true lesson here isn't just about upgrading our alarm systems, it's about upgrading our humanity. In our fast-paced modern world, the elderly often become invisible. We drive past their homes assuming they are safe behind closed doors. But true security doesn't come from a smart doorbell on a porch. It comes from the vigilant eyes of a deeply connected community. We must step out of our isolated bubbles. Check on that elderly neighbor who struggles just to walk to the mailbox. Notice the unfamiliar car lingering in the shadows of your street. Be the watchful protector that a severed wire cannot disable. Nancy's terrifying ordeal in the dead of night reminds us that profound vulnerability is a magnet for malice. Let this tragedy ignite a fierce protective fire within our neighborhoods. Do not let the vulnerable fight alone in the dark. Stand up, look out for one another, and remember, an active, caring community is our ultimate defense.